Hey, everybody. This is Stephen Libman, and welcome to Let's Talk Money. This is going to be a journey where we unlock the truth about your money. So, let's start things off today with you think it's safe saving your money in a savings account? Think again. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into why money has to move or it dies, and how sitting on your cash is actually negatively affecting you and possibly the riskiest thing that you could possibly be doing. And the way I'm going to do that today is I'm going to share with you, we're going to go online, we're going to actually look at an investing versus savings kind of calculator. And I'm going to walk you through the different scenarios. So, you know what? Let's go ahead and jump right into that right now. What you're looking at right here is a simple investment calculator. Now, I'm going to use it a little bit differently to show you some things the way I want you to see them because they are so radically different. All right, the first thing I want you to see right at the very top is we're going to assume an initial investment of $100,000. Now, we have to remember one thing, that when we're making an investment, usually that investment is in after tax money. Of course, what do I mean by after tax money? Well, you may have had to earn $150,000 in which to have 100,000 to be able to invest. So we're going to be talking about the two things that eat away at your money the most. Number one, inflation. Number two, taxes. Now let's assume that you take your $100,000 and you just leave it sitting around doing nothing. You have it in a box, you have it in your mattress, you have it in a safe, but you don't have it even in the bank. Let's assume that 100,000 is sitting in that box for the next 20 years. It's earning absolutely nothing. You're not making any contributions, and we're just going to assume for the moment no tax and no inflation. Well, if you look to the chart to the right, what you're going to see is 100,000 after the end of 20 years is 100,000. Okay, now most people know that to be true, and yet, believe it or not, oftentimes people are sitting on their money, not even keeping it in the bank. Well, what if we took that money and we put it in the bank? Up till, let's say, a few years ago, how much were you getting on a savings account? You might be lucky to get 1% on a savings account. And that would mean that in 20 years, your projected amount that you would actually be making is about $22,000 because you invested 100, you have about 122,000. Now, we're going to go ahead and take a look at what happens if inflation is only 1%. If inflation is only 1% and you're only earning 1%, you would think it's a wash. But it really isn't, because what's ending up happening is that your earnings and your compound earnings are actually being wiped out. So 1% to 1% still says you're going to have $100,000, but you had a potential of earning considerably more. So we're going to change the numbers a little bit. We're going to change what happens when inflation is 3% and the exact same situation. So now if your money is sitting in the bank earning you 1% and you've got 3% inflation, you've got $67,000 at the end of 20 years. So how much have you actually made? You haven't. You've lost $33,000. And I know what you're saying, Stephen, over the last little while, you know what? I can get as much as 3% in the bank. So we're going to go ahead and put 3% in the bank. With 3% inflation, you haven't made any money. But we also know that inflation is not 3%. We know that the consumer price index, which doesn't include gas and groceries, we know that it's currently 3.9, which means you're losing $16,000. But those of us that actually buy groceries and actually go and buy gas, we well know inflation is more like, well, 10%. And that would mean that your 100,000 after 20 years is only worth 26,000. Now, I'm sure a couple of skeptics are going to say, no, 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 it's only 7%. No problem. You've only lost $54,000. But Stephen, I can go and I can get 5.5% Investing right now in zero risk, I can put my money in a high interest savings account. And you would be correct. So now you're only losing 25,000 because the inflation rate is still outpacing whatever the rate of return happens to be. Now, of course, I haven't touched tax yet. Let's assume that you're in a 30% tax bracket. Well, congratulations. Now, the monies that you've earned are being taken away by the tax authority. So you've got 55,000 from your original 100. So even though you're earning 5.5%, inflation is 7, and your taxes are 30, well, guess what? You only have $55,000 value at the end of 20 years. Of course, a lot of people are in a 40% tax bracket because if you're initially investing 100,000, you may have had to earn 150,000. And now it's even worse. So let's look at some numbers to make it better. Let's look at the numbers that we have to get. So let's forget about this ridiculous 5.5%. What if you knew how to invest at 10%? Well, if you knew how to invest at 10%, and then you realize that if inflation is 7, but your tax rate is 40, you're still going to notice that you're not making money. So how much money do I have to really make? Well, 12%, I finally made a little bit of money. 15% return, I finally did a little bit better than that. And I'm going to suggest to you that you need to be making at least 20% on your money. I'm going to suggest to you that you need to find a way to reduce the income tax that might be applicable. For example, what would happen if we earned this money in a retirement savings account? In the US, let's say a Roth IRA. In Canada, let's say a TFSA. Well, then your tax would be 0. And if your tax would be 0, your $250,000 just became $990,000. So what if you knew how to do that? Better yet, what if you said, Stephen, I don't think I'm going to get 20. Okay, what if you could learn how to loan your money from your retirement accounts with little to no risk and generate 12% return? You're still making $250,000. Or better yet, what if you learned how to make 15%? Just a little bit of a nudge on one side or the other changes everything. Now, of course, when it comes to investing, you shouldn't invest one amount and forget about it. So let's go back to that retirement savings account for a moment. Let's go back to simply 10%. Let's leave it at 7% inflation. Let's leave it at 0% tax because we're going to use a tax-free account. Well, we only have $173,000, except you're allowed to contribute to your tax-free account. Let's just say this year, which is about $7,000. So we're allowed to contribute on an annual basis $7,000 a year. Just that $7,000 a year has dramatically increased the amount at the end of the day. And of course, if you can get a little bit better than 10%, say 12, the numbers go up by almost 50%, even though you've only increased your return by 20%. I hope that you see the difference between what happens when you sit on the sideline and you have no rate of return and you have no additional contributions. And even with a 0% inflation rate, gives you nothing more than you had. But if that inflation rate was 7%, by sitting on the sidelines, your 100,000, which you started with 150, is now worth all of 25. And that's why I wanted to show you a simple calculator and not actually go into, just talking about it. I just wanted to share that with you so that you could see what happens, that money moves or it dies. Well, it doesn't die quickly, does it? It dies a slow, painful death. And to wrap things up, I want you to remember that money is like a seed. You plant the seed and you're hoping for a mighty tree to grow. Some people plant the seed and the seed remains dormant and nothing grows. You can't wait 20 years to find out whether or not your seed grew or it didn't. By sitting on the sidelines, by sitting on your money, the very thing you're worried about happening, which is losing money in an investment, is guaranteed to happen because you haven't done anything with your money. So if this video struck a chord, if it resonated with you, go ahead and hit the like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. You can also visit me on our website at www.stephenlibman.com, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter. I've got some great tools to help you figure out money. And join us next time where we continue the conversation about money and investing. Until then, remember, money moves or it dies.